You just want to slap him. You're just like, oh, you absolute shit.
Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
Hello, how are you, James?
I am good, yes. Looking forward to our chat, actually, about Anora. Nice to do a film that's just come out.
I know, I actually felt like I've been waiting the longest time to talk about this film because I saw it as soon as it came out, I think before Christmas in the UK, and absolutely loved it and really wanted to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I mean, watching it, unfortunately, I missed it at the cinema. I mean, I think it is still getting screened. I am absolutely gutted I didn't see it at the cinema, so I've watched it. It's now, I purchased it outright for £12, which is more than it cost to see it at the cinema, but now I've got a digital streaming copy. But yeah, well worth seeing at the cinema for that. I mean, yeah, a great film. And just kicking myself for not immediately going to see the latest Sean Baker at the cinema. I mean, I've seen Florida Project. I haven't seen Red Rocket, actually, but a big fan of his work.
Yeah, same. I somehow missed Red Rocket, which I'm kind of annoyed at myself about because I love Tangerine. I love the Florida Project. I think we've spoken about both films. Certainly Tangerine we talked about more in depth. I don't think we've actually done an episode on the Florida Project
No,
yet.
I don't think so. Yeah.
We should at some point because that is an incredible film and I know that you loved it. So we'll have to come back to that. But, you know, Sean Baker is an interesting director because he definitely has his topics of interest, which is very much marginalized communities. This is his second film about sex workers. He's done films about immigrants and people living in poverty, as with the Florida Project. And that's kind of his MO. But also this kind of, I think the other thing that's very him is this kinetic pacing. And I don't even know how to describe it, but the energy of his films is very him and is definitely here in Anora as it is in the other ones I've seen of his.
Yeah. I feel like he's kind of taking the kind of classicism and the formalism in the 1970s of Hollywood America, and also the fact that what was happening in the 70s in America was they were covering topics that were seen as culturally important or subject matter that perhaps hadn't been covered before. So I think the spirit of that mindset is kind of what Sean Baker is kind of, it's his modern take on that. He's got that kind of very formal classical style of filmmaking. He loves making movies, and also his concerns and topics have evolved from what might have been the topics that were covered in the 70s. So I think he's like, you know, he's essentially the new generation of these 1970s auteur filmmakers, in my opinion.
Interesting. I like that. There's also this thing that I guess we'll get into as we talk about the structure of the film, where he likes to slow it down and you know, in Tangerine, for example, that is the day in the life of the main character. We follow her throughout her day, and there is a similar section of Anora that is basic. It is almost like that, you know. It slows right down from like a fast pace in the earlier part of the film.
Oh yeah, I mean, like it's wonderfully done, and especially that point of the first act of the film is getting swept up in the world of like Anora, who's a sex worker working as a kind of a dancer, lap dancer at a club, and she meets essentially a Russian billionaire's son, and she gets caught up in a whirlwind romance that ensues, and it's all very heightened, it's very fast paced, and we're chopping through time. You know, like it's clear that a lot of time passes quite a lot, and then suddenly the film changes pace, and it's almost like somebody switching the lights on in a nightclub. We've gone from this fantasy neon-soaked world of parties and, you know, sexy women taking their clothes off, and it's a fantasy world, and then suddenly we get pulled down from that, and it's almost like the film becomes very real time. We get extended sections that happen without cutting forward in time, and also all the neon, all the amazing sunsets and sunrises, they've all gone. It's just like an overcast, snowy, rainy day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about it, is the gear shifts through the film, because it's true. Yeah. So we meet Mikey Madison's Anora, and I have to say, I'm obsessed with this actor. I saw her in a TV series called Better Things some years ago.
I saw her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She was very memorable in a small role in that.
Yeah, she was, and that is what Sean Baker saw her in, and immediately I think he saw her in that, and clocked her. And then he saw her in Scream. She was also in a Scream sequel, I think Scream 5 perhaps. And after that, he said, turned to his wife and said, my next film is going to be about her, for her. So he wrote this whole movie for Mikey Madison. And she was aware of Sean Baker already as a director, but this is her first real big break. It's her first lead performance, and he came up with the character and then brought it to her, and she then went, okay, great, let's do it, and dove in for 3 months learning Russian, having not spoken it before, and
getting a pole dancing pole installed by her dad.
Yeah, exactly. Having dance lessons and being choreographed, and in the film, you absolutely believe she is Anora. This is full immersion into a character. But she's a very, really compelling presence, because I saw her in this TV show years ago, and she plays like the oldest daughter in this family of girls. And I even then I was like, because she's so beautiful in this slightly unusual way, and she just has this like magnetism. So she really does bring so much to that character. And she's got this like, okay, this sounds kind of cliche, but she has this toughness, but also this real vulnerability that just comes through her eyes. And there are many, there are a few moments in the film where she can't speak for one reason or another, and you just see it all through the expression that she has. So just perfect casting. And it really does, I think, the best films are the ones, I think, where there is a kind of a mix between the writing of the script and you at least already have the actor in mind. I think that's when it really works, rather than trying to find the actor to fit the role.
Yeah, absolutely. Because watching it, you can't imagine that Mikey Madison isn't anything but that character. It's a classic case of you totally believe it. Everything about it. She looks the part, she talks the part, her accent's great. When she does the dances, it's clear she can do the dancing. We're not cutting to a body double or anything like that. It feels very grounded, which is, I think, it's a skill that Sean Baker has. He's able to make something feel stylized, but also feel very, very grounded. It's an interesting balance. But it's interesting what you said about how Sean Baker wrote the film for a specific actor. And I think reading about the making of this film, that seems to be part of Sean Baker's process, and I love that, because he said that, for example, when they found the mansion, the oligarch mansion, where a lot of the film takes place, there's parties there, there's like fight sequences there, it's a big part of the film. Once they found that, then he wrote the script around the location, because obviously maybe the set pieces you want to have, you're going to have to accommodate the layout and the design of the house, or maybe the house inspires ideas, but he said that was very much a part of it. And he also said that the genesis of Anora was in a film he wanted to make with a collaborator who's been working with his student film. And he wanted to make an authentic film about the Russian-American community in Brighton Beach. So, like, literally the opposite of what Anora is, and yet what's happened is that was the germ of it. So that part of the film, like when those characters appear, you think they're going to be thugs and goons and hired hands, and yet they're not at all that. They're all actually rather sweet people. They're kind of the fixers and the babysitters of this oligarch's son. And so, because it was researched and developed, those characters were meant to have their own film, I think, is basically it. What's happened is they're not the main focus of the film, but it means that when they come into it, they're much more complex, and the characters are much more interestingly drawn, because there was a whole process where maybe that was going to be a film, but it wasn't. Now they're just characters in a bigger film.
Yes, and you really feel that, because Brighton Beach, where the film is set, is such a huge part of the film, and it isn't. There are various moments where the camera pulls out and we see these, we see a theme park ride in the backdrop of Brighton Beach. It's kind of an iconic ride there, and you go into the diners and the restaurants where the Russian Armenian community tend to hang out, and when we meet the main fixer, who you mentioned, he's being interrupted from a christening with his grandson or granddaughter, this baby, and you really get this sense of of the life that he has within this community outside of his job that he's now having to abandon in order to go to work and try and sort out this marriage of the son. So it's very richly built around that, which I actually think is probably part of the one criticism that I've seen of the film which is that we don't get a lot of Anora outside of her job as a sex worker. We really only see her in work or with Vanya, who she marries. And I think probably part of that is the fact that he had this other interest that was like ticking away, this interest in Brighton Beach and the Russian Armenian community there, which he wanted to spend some time with. And perhaps that was kind of what was lacking, because you can't have it all, you know. But I have to say, that's part of it that I really enjoyed seeing. The fact that the like place that they are in is such a part of the story is really satisfying.
Yeah, no, he wanted to. Apparently, Schwarzenegger said he wanted to make like the ultimate Brighton Beach film, you know, kind of which and I've never been there, but god damn it, do I get a feel of the atmosphere. It's like this faded glamour that maybe back in the 50s and 60s it was the height of entertainment, and now it's like a ghost town. You know, you just you know, the sense of place, and it's just such a great contrast from the first act of the film where it's all neon saturated parties, drugs, all that, you know, it's just all this fantasy world of a good time, and then you couldn't go. The polar opposite of that is to be in this kind of sad winter feeling part of the world. It's
true, but it's, you know, it's interesting because there is this gear shift, but actually it's so well done because you're both taken along with it and it's fun and exciting, but you also know how that it isn't real, you know, and that you're waiting for the bubble to burst, even though you enjoy being in it so much. So let's just bring it. I was
so anxious. Jesus Christ! That opening act, I'm like, oh, this is anxiety fuel. It's like everyone's partying way too hard. Calm down, Jesus Christ! Just a little bit, please. I mean, we all love a good party, but come on.
So let's just pull back to the plot a little bit, because I think, as always, we're just diving straight in. But
yeah, all killer, no filler.
Yeah. So we meet Anora, and she quickly, within a few minutes of the film, you know, we have this great setup of her working in the club where she works and doing her thing, walking around, meeting potential clients, and then she meets Vanya, this Russian guy. He's only 21 years old. He's clearly completely adolescent. But they have a good time together, and he has a lot of money, and so he asks her to come visit him at his house, kind of out of hours, having had, you know, a very profitable night for her. You know, it's been a good night with meeting this you know, high roller, and she goes to meet him, as you said, at this amazing mansion. And I think it's funny because it's quite clear, I think, as a slightly, so she's a bit older than him, which I think is interesting and kind of important. I think that this film feels like a version of Pretty Woman, but where everything is inversed and corrupted a bit. And I think an important part of it is that, you know, the trope of the older man, the almost paternal figure who's going to save this poor, destitute sex worker. Instead, we have this younger guy being the person, and she is, of course, got a lot more sense about her, and I don't mean a sort of, you know, street smart way or whatever, but just genuinely, he is clearly a bit of an idiot, and she is not. Yep. But it's funny because she can't quite work out why he has money when it seems perfectly obvious, just within this huge mansion, that this is a boy in his parents' house. But, you know, that comes out later, and they end up, and then just like in Pretty Woman, he asks her, after they have a great date together and some more fun, he asked her to spend a week with him, and he'll give her, I think it was, is it $10,000?
No, it's 15, and she said she'd have done it for 10, I think.
I think they negotiate down to 10. Maybe it is 15. Well, either way,
I'm pretty sure it's 15. But the joke, and she said she gets the upper hand at the end. So I'd done it for 10. I don't know. I thought that was it. I've seen it more recently. I'm not just.
I watched it last night.
Okay.
I rewatched
and I'm
it
usually,
and I wrote it down.
And I'm usually rubbish at these things, so
I don't know why I'm arguing with this. Oh, you're so right. Yeah, I would have done it for 10. I would have paid 30. Is what they say to each other, which is almost the same dialogue as in Pretty Woman. It's just it was $3,000 back in the 80s, but
I see, times have changed.
But the dialogue is the same. So you're, you know, having watched Pretty Woman many, many times throughout my childhood and teen years. I know that film very well, and there's a definite matching of the beats of this movie in the first
Right.
part of it. And so they have this, yeah, like you said, like kind of brightly lit, with with amazingly Take That's song.
Greatest Day.
Yeah, Greatest Day, like a kind of club version of Greatest Day playing, which
Oh, is it a remix? I was wondering about that. Yeah,
yeah,
'cause
I
that
think
doesn't sound-
so. Yeah, and you know what? I bloody loved it. I was like, I was there with them. I
Oh, I
was
was totally in
it.
there. I mean, I just want to give a shout out to the sound design team and the sound mixing. It's such a... I put my headphones on to watch it because Sean Baker's films always have great sound design, great music choices, and this is no exception. Like every time you're in a club, it feels like you're in a club. You've got that bassy sound, the distance, there's a lot of care and attention. So again, the film's called Anora, and the film is clearly her point of view on what's happening. So every time you're in a party, it's like you are there with it, like you're in her head, you're experiencing the sounds of the party. So yeah, I was totally into it. Like it really drew you in.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. It feels so potent because you can so imagine getting caught up with this. She's spending
Oh
time
yeah.
with this fun gang of people who have so much money. She is being paid to go on a private jet, be flown to Las Vegas, party all the time, spend time with someone she finds fun. It's like you're just like can so see her being taken along with this, and you're taken along with it. We know it's got to end at some point, and probably she knows on some
Yeah.
level as well. But she's like, "Fuck it, I'm going with it." But then things start to turn because he doesn't want to go back to Russia. This adolescent who knows nothing about life somehow thinks that if he gets married and gets the green card, he'll be able to stay here. And so they decide to get married and do the classic Vegas wedding. And then we go back to New York, go back to Brighton Beach, and suddenly, like we said, gears shift, everything changes. And shortly after, there is essentially a home invasion to their mansion because his parents, Vanya's parents, have caught wind of the fact that he's married a sex worker, which is, bringing great shame on the family, as the fixer explains. And so these three quote unquote thugs interrupt everything. And we slow down into real time as these three men enter the house. And it's funny because it's so deftly done, I think, because it is funny. Like it's a funny scene. There's this like almost, it's like physical comedy when these men enter the house and essentially tie up Anora. But it's also terrifying and horrible. It's like, oh my God, from her perspective, these three men, one with his hood up, coming in and taking her hostage. One, by the way, Vanya just like runs away and abandons her. It's
Vanya just
terrifying.
legs it. He just legs it.
Yeah, he legs it. And she is left there. But there is this amazing thing where there's all this physical comedy about her fighting back against them. She kicks one of them and breaks his nose. She bites them. She fights like nothing else. She doesn't give up. And it makes you admire her even more. You're also terrified for it, but you're also laughing. There's just something so funny about everything smashing up in this house. And the scene is so anxiety-inducing and tense, and yet you're also like deeply entertained and amused. It's like all these emotions at once.
Because as the film carries on and we spend time with these three characters, they're not just some cardboard cutout thugs. They're actually decent people trying to do a job. They're not actually violent, really. They're just trying to get a job done with causing, I guess, the least amount of fuss. But yeah, I love that bit where Vanya just legs it though. He just runs. He's just off. And with that, it's almost because the whole thing was being powered by him being a billionaire's son. The whole fantasy world that we were in as the audience was due to him. And as soon as he leaves the scene, the whole fantasy collapses because it's requiring him, with all his money and connections and power, to be around to create that fantasy world. And then for the rest of the film, it's like we have to stay with Annie as she's there in the harsh, cold reality when she's not in his orbit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so, even because we are so with her, that moment where he runs away, it is very funny. It's cut in a funny way, but it's also the most like heart-wrenching, devastating thing to witness because you're like, oh my God, you would never, I kept thinking in this scene, like, where is this going to go? Wow, we're here a long time. It ends up being a 30-minute scene. That scene in the house with the home invasion is longer than the film has been up until this point. The fantasy is shorter than that. And
the come down always lasts longer than the party.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that, up until the point that Vanya runs away, that they're freaking out and these men won't leave and there doesn't seem to be any resolution. You're thinking something will be figured out here. And when he just legs it and leaves her with these men,
yeah,
it is so unfathomable to me that someone could do that, even though it is so in keeping with his character, because he clearly does not care about anyone or anything other than himself, and doesn't have any thought past his own pleasure in the next 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
And you just suddenly, it's like, we all wake up and like, oh yeah, that is exactly who he is. And of course he would do that, but it's heartbreaking and devastating.
It really is, and he's out of the picture. We don't cut to him for the entire home invasion, this half-hour sequence. But then we do finally cut back to him. And where is he? What's the first shot we see of him? He's literally swaggering through the doors of yet another strip club. In fact, no, it's the strip club, isn't it? When he first met Anora, and goes back, and he's just like he probably has forgotten that he got married. You can just tell that that's the kind of character. He's just like literally living moment to moment.
He is beyond diabolical. But this is what's great about it, is that, as we said, so the fixer and his 2 bodyguards, I should name these people. So Igor, I've put in brackets, nice bodyguard. he becomes very important to the film, because when we first meet him, he does seem intimidating. Like we said, his hood is up. He's not saying very much, but it does become clear that he's a very sweet-hearted guy. Even though he ties Anora up, he holds her in his lap. It's not a great introduction. And then alongside him, there is Taurus, who's kind of the boss guy, the fixer, as he's kind of described it. His job is literally to babysit Vanya, and he took 2 weeks off. And in that time, what did Vanya do but get married against his parents' wishes? And then there's Ganik. Apologies to our Armenian listeners, who is kind of Taurus's left-hand man, and they're all just, as you said, they're all just trying to deal with this situation. It is their job to try and undo this mess of Vanya marrying Annie. And as the film goes on, we basically move from the home invasion to them then searching for Vanya. And so we get this motley crew of the 4 of them, of Taurus, Garnik, Igor, and Annie, looking for Vanya. They all have the same goal, to find him, for different reasons. Like, Annie doesn't want to let go of the dream. And I think really she just doesn't want to be told what to do. She's not going to be made to get divorced just because these men say so, even though she's probably by this point understanding that this was not going to work out. They're not going to end up having kids together, and his parents are going to come over for tea. But there is this real thing of this film ultimately being about class disparity and the bonding of people against the upper classes. I think it's almost a bit of an inverse of Parasite, which really shows how people on the lower levels of our class system can turn against each other. In this film, they actually do ultimately come together, even though they're adversaries when they first meet. Ultimately, Anya buddies up with these other guys. They're working together. They're on the mission to find Vanya. And there's something weirdly kind of heartwarming about that, even though the whole time the anxiety is just building and you're just like, oh God, because you just feel so for Annie in the fact that she's kind of trapped in the situation. She can't just leave and go home. She needs to resolve this one way or the other, whether it's, fighting to not get divorced or getting divorced. She has to find this man and sort it out. But she's trapped in the situation because he's abandoned her and she can't get out of it. And so, the anxiety is intense, but it's
the anxiety had subsided for me, like, after we got out of Act 1, because once we got into real time, the anxiety levels dropped a bit. It was just that the opening, just the partying, just chill out.
Really? But did you not find the home invasion really
Oh,
anxious and anxiety?
absolutely, but there was a point when you suddenly start to realise these guys aren't going to actually harm me. Once you get into the fact that there's more to it than we expected, it's not going to be simple. These are thugs. They want to hurt her, and like you start at some point in that home invasion sequence. They start bonding basically, don't they?
Yeah, it's true. But I think I never actually let go of my anxiety because I was so worried about them. Like, how are they going to find Vanya, who's just disappeared? And even though, of course, there should be some resolution, I was just so in Annie's head about, like, he's abandoned her and she can't get out of this mess until she finds him. And how on earth is that going to happen? But you're right. But my anxiety about them, you know what, when those bodyguards first turned up, before they see Annie, I wasn't really worried about them because it did seem like, what's the worst that can happen? I don't know. I sort of thought, I felt like it was going to be okay. But then the minute they start kind of tying her up and not letting her go, that's when
Right.
I was, and her being on her own without Vanya there, just feeling how I'd feel. Then I got terrified, but then it subsided. It was just a roller coaster the whole way through.
Because I wouldn't have known this if I hadn't just recently, doing my research, watched a Vanity Fair breaking down a scene with Sean Baker and Mickey Madison. They were saying that in the party scene that they have, where Anora brings her friend along to a house party they're having, the three Armenians are actually there. There's a few shots of them at the party. They're just kind of babysitting the party, and one of them says, "Hey, this is not a jungle gym. Get down from there." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I hadn't spotted that first watch."
Yeah, it's well woven in, but yeah, she never even really clocks them, right? She doesn't even
No.
notice she's in her own little world at that party. Yeah, I think that was partly why initially I wasn't worried, because he's such a babysitter, the main Taurus, the main kind of henchman, I guess, that there was these comedic beats, so I didn't feel scared. But then it all gets so real that it was, it gets terrifying.
It's interesting as well, just seeing how this film was made, because this is this has made the biggest box office return for any of Sean Baker's films. But compared to the numbers we normally bandy around, I think it's made like 33 million. So it's not made a lot of money, but it's made the most he's ever made, and the budget was 6 million. It's like, it does seem like we're in a world now where these kind of films, maybe in the 90s, would have got a much bigger, much more significant budget. And now to make these kind of films, you essentially have to work in the fringes much more, and you have to work a bit harder. Like, I was amazed that they shot on film, because I was watching it thinking, this looks beautiful, but I can't imagine they shot on film, did they? And then, of course, because Florida Project was shot on film, and I looked at the cinematography, yes, they shot all of it on film, which is what, again, helps sell that fantasy element, because we're not just shooting in real-world strip clubs and nightclubs. We're shooting it on film, and you don't shoot every day on film, so it elevates those sequences as well. But just when you've not got much money, $6 million does not go far. So, they had to be very resourceful. But that's the kind of filmmaking I like, where you have limited resources and you're trying to make it look as good as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it does, part of why I love it so much is that it does just look so beautifully, so artistically filmed, and yeah, just so cinematic. But then there are things like Annie eating from a Tupperware box in the first scene in the back of the strip club, And as we talked about, when we get to the kind of mid part of the film and the setting has changed and we're out of the bubble and into the kind of reality, it's a lot starker, but still like beautifully done,
That's, because shooting on film just gives you some kind of sheen of like filmic beauty, where all you did was shoot on film, so that it helps give you that not for free, because the thing is, you don't get it for free because you pay physically a fortune for it, and the discipline of the difficulty of shooting on film, it's like everyone has to be on their A game when they're shooting, when you shoot on film.
And anamorphic lenses I spotted.
I spotted that in your notes, Lily. Absolutely, yes. Some old Russian lenses, which have very unique characteristics of flaring, and they kind of go soft at the edges. But yeah, it looked great.
So let's talk about the controversy around this film, because as we were saying before we started recording, this is the year of the smear when it comes to Oscar nominations. Pretty much every film bar Conclave has had some kind of backlash against it. And Anora's came fairly early because Mikey Madison did a actor-on-actor interview where she talked about how she chose not to use a intimacy coordinator.
Okay. sounds non-controversial comment, it seems.
Really?
Well, if the actor's deciding that they don't want one between them, it's not like the producer's going, hey, look, we're not going to get you an intimacy coordinator. You're all right with that, right, Mickey? It's like, if it comes from the actors who are doing it, I don't know. Sorry, talk me through the controversy.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That is kind of the debate that raged after that, because
Right.
you're right. Like, on the one hand, on the surface, that sounds like an actor making a choice, and that is her right to do, and her autonomy should be respected. But on the other hand, if a director comes to you and says, would you like a intimacy coordinator, rather than saying, we've cast an intimacy coordinator, would you like to come meet them, or hired one? The problem with it, right, is that this isn't a neutral, she's not being asked this by a neutral party. The director is the one who has hired her, is paying her, is in control of the scene. There is a power imbalance there, to use a hackneyed phrase. And so if you ask the actor, they might feel under some obligation to say no. As we've just talked about, it's a small budget movie. It's expensive to have an intimacy coordinator, especially in a film where there are so many scenes of nudity. And the other problem with it is that Mikey Madison is not the only person in those scenes where she is naked. Not only are there the other women who played sex workers, who in the very first scene of the movie are in various states of undress and performing lap dances, so they're doing very intimate things. But there are also the extras who are having the lap dance performed to them. They may well have appreciated having an intimacy coordinator. I certainly would if I was that part. And so by her making that choice, it affects not just her, but everyone on set. And yeah, and as I said, it should not really be the actor's decision whether or not to have one. Actually, it should be the whole production's decision. And a film with that many intimate moments, especially ones that are, it's not just like a sex scene is one thing, but also like performing a dance in a state of undress with there's so much like voyeurism to that I feel like having someone to kind of manage that is kind of important. But having said that, you're absolutely right that she was given the choice and she made that choice. I certainly don't criticize her for it, but I think that the positive of this conversation is that maybe going forward, I think it's unlikely that films will do that again. They won't put it in the hands of the decision won't be given to the actor, because I think fundamentally that is a mistake.
Okay, yeah.
That's my take on it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely see the point about one actor decision affecting how other people's experiences might be on set. Actually, yeah, I see the point. I guess I don't have particularly much of a strong, passionate riposte. It would be interesting. Like, I wonder. This hypothetical never exists, isn't it? What would the film be like? Could we see the version where the intimacy coordinator was involved? Did it make any difference to the finished effect of the film? Did it make any difference at all? Did it change fundamentally how those sequences felt and looked? So what I'm trying to say is, we'll never know this, but maybe it was the correct choice for the film that Mikey Madison did. However, that is at the expense of some people's well-being or how they feel around sex scenes while they're being filmed. Yeah.
I mean, that's a question. Does an intimacy coordinator impact the final product? Because my assumption would be no. It's the director's job for a film. I mean, okay, I don't know. Of course, it must do to a certain extent, but I would think that if you're trying to achieve something as a director, the intimacy coordinator's job is to help facilitate that in the most comfortable and safe way it can. So ideally, the end product wouldn't be affected, but how the people involved, the actors involved, feel is going to be affected. And that's the job, is to make everyone comfortable.
But I'm just presuming on the part of the actor that there was an artistic reason why she didn't want to. I haven't read into it, so I don't know. But I'm assuming the reasons for her rejecting one were more to do with performance, character, and art, rather than like, I don't want one because I'm a diva. So I that's why I'm asking the question. I'm imagining that for her there was some part of a process, or that she just thought that something about the authenticity might have got interrupted. That would be my
Yeah, I think
thoughts why. But
I believe that her reasoning was that she felt very comfortable with Sean Baker and Sean Baker's wife, who's the producer on the film. Baker and his wife would show her how they wanted her and Mark. I'm not going to attempt to say his name. I'm so sorry, but the actor who plays Vanya, the positions they should be in, and Mikey Madison was comfortable with that. So yeah. So I think it seemed like, this is a small movie. I feel comfortable with them. I don't need this additional thing that I honestly feel like it's the slowing down of everything because of this additional check that needs to be brought in, and the financial cost of that, and she felt like she just didn't need it. She was comfortable without it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I guess I can see why there's I can see why there is a controversy around it, but for me, yeah, I'm not as inflamed to the controversy as other things maybe. Yeah, I see the point. It's just yeah. I especially see your point in the fact that there's people who might have appreciated or would have wanted an intimacy coordinator, but it would have been more controversial should it have been studio mandated or director mandated that we're not having one. Whereas to me, the fact that it was a choice that the lead actor took, I don't know, it mires the controversy a little bit for me, tamps down those flames.
Yeah, for me, I just think I can't comprehend one actor saying I don't need one, and then that meaning that there isn't one on set at all when there were so many other actors working. I don't think that is good at all. But I love this film. I don't think that's not, I don't think the film should be cancelled, and I don't think this really denigrates the film. I just think that that shouldn't happen, and hopefully because it's been talked about. If Anora hadn't mentioned that, if Mikey Madison, if she hadn't mentioned that, it wouldn't be talked about. And I think it is something that should be thought about. It should be considered by whose job is it to book that person? Because I just do think it's fundamentally not correct that the child should be with the actor, especially a young actor in her first starring role. So much about it isn't right, but that to me doesn't take anything away from the film itself. I think it's a near perfect film, and I loved it.
I wonder who's the best intimacy coordinator in the business, because you've got the best cinematographer, the best we got the best intimacy coordinator here for you. We're flying them in special from Paris.
Yeah, well, there are many well-established and really talented intimacy coordinators, but it's a very new thing. It's really only been truly popularized since Me Too. But you're right. Who are the
who are the best?
Who's the best?
Write in and let us know. We want to know the best in the business.
Okay, so let's just smoothly move on from intimacy coordinators and sex scene controversy into the final act of the film, because thank God, finally Vanya is discovered, as James mentioned, back in the bloody strip club where he met Anora, getting a lap dance from Anora's nemesis, a woman called Diamond. Devastating. And he is completely intoxicated, will not speak to Annie, won't engage with her whatsoever. It is so infuriating to watch. And then shortly after, we are joined by Vanya's parents, the Russian oligarchs who have made him the spoilt brat that he is.
Oh, yeah, their presence looms heavy over the second and third act of the film, and it's building to when they finally realize they're kind of built up and played to a degree like kind of supervillains in a Marvel movie. These are the bad guys. They kind of the introductory shot of his mother as she kind of walks down the steps of her private jet, and the sun kind of gleams behind her head, and you get the lens flare coming down the barrel of the camera. It's all played up that these are incredibly powerful people, and she has a line, his mother, where Anya's saying she's going to sue her or something. It's not right. And she goes, if you do that, we'll basically take you to the cleaners. And she says something along the lines of, and the lives of all your family and all your friends will be destroyed. And I was just like, oh my God, she's awful.
Yeah, she is, yes. Galina is the mother's name, expertly played by Daria Ecker. It's very... it's just the I mean I'm like it's surely a caricature, but it's a very satisfying one. This kind of archetypal controlling mother that Vanya has been rebelling against in the early part of the film, and then in her presence completely crumbles. And you know that's the reason he ran away. Just hearing that his parents are flying in from Russia makes him go into a spiral where he, you know, completely abandons his wife. And it's incredible to see because you're right. There is the theme really that kind of threads through from the minute everything kind of falls to pieces. It's the fact that Vanya won't communicate with Annie whatsoever. You know, she's still clinging to this hope. She's still trying to be rational that, like, you know, they can't force us to do anything. You're a grown up. We can still be together. You know, don't, like, her perspective is very much someone who has her own independence and does her own thing, which, by the way, is partly what I think is kind of so refreshing about this film is in complete contrast to Pretty Woman. There was never any sense that she feels like her life is like lesser and that her job is like shameful and that she should be doing something else and there are greener pastures out there possibly with this man. You know, it's not that at all, even though the people around her are shaming her. You know, these bodyguards, though not ultimately super violent, do shame her about being a sex worker, and so does Vanya himself actually, and his parents. But she never has that attitude about it at all, and we're seeing it through her eyes. But when they finally come back together, he won't speak to her at all, and it's so frustrating.
Awful.
It's so
like, because you kind of know that that's what he's really like, and you know that this is going to end up happening at some point. But then you just want to slap him. You're just like, oh, you absolute shit.
Yeah.
We knew you were like this. It's not surprising, but you just after
But like, not even feigning giving a shit. You know, he literally does not give a shit. You know, he says, "I was like, oh well." He's like, "Yeah, don't you get it? We're gonna get a divorce, but thanks for the week. I had fun." He doesn't care at all. He doesn't care what he's put her through emotionally. And Annie's realization of that, and then her response to fight back and say, "No, I'm not going to go. I'm going to take you to the cleaners. I'm going to get half." And in that moment, you're like, yes, Annie, fuck them. But of course, the reality of it comes crashing down when, as you say, Vanya's mum says, no, we're going to take everything you have. We have all the power. And so she has to go with them. And that's really when her and Igor, he's been like trying to silently kind of communicate like empathy with her throughout the film. And she's kind of been a brick wall, absolutely taken against him. But it's kind of for the final parts of this film that they really kind of connect, the bodyguard and her. And I have to say the ending is a bit unsatisfying. I didn't love the ending, the final scene. What did you think about it?
I thought it's like one of those kind of classic endings where it is unsatisfying because it's ambiguous. Because I'm like, what exactly is going on here? But I don't know. I don't know quite how you'd end the film. I like the ending. I thought it left me a question. I wasn't quite sure where she'd been left or quite where we got there. But yeah, I liked it. I liked the fact that we'd started off in this crazy neon-drenched party world, and then suddenly we can hear the windscreen wipers, the snow's just falling in the background. It's black and white, essentially, the image of monochromatic. So we've gone from the very kind of wild club atmosphere to very intimate moment, you know, and bloody hell, she's just been through a lot, Anora. So it's like this is the kind of just where it ends up for her, I think.
So it ends up with her in a car with Igor, and he gives her. She had her ring taken away from her, which made her scream earlier in the film, and he gives her the ring back. He's like he stole it basically and got it for her, which is like very sweet, touching thing. And then her response is to get on his lap. And I think they have sex. I wasn't quite sure if it was more lap dance or sex. And he's kind of passive into it, but like not, but kind of shocked. And he tries to kiss her and she doesn't want to. And then she kind of cries and pulls away and then is just crying on his chest. I don't know. I didn't like that. Like the ultimate thing is like she's reverting to, like, it's almost like, all she does is her identity is a sex worker, and so her final like act in the movie is to have sex. That's what I didn't like about it. I mean, the ambiguity, good. I always want ambiguity. I was happy with that, but I thought I understand that he probably didn't know how else to end the film, but that for me was a little bit unsatisfying.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been a million. I didn't need to see a sex scene end the film, but it felt. I don't know. It didn't feel jarring. Put it that way. It felt in keeping with the world and the character we created. But I do totally understand your point. You know,
I think you're right.
You know, maybe that was the point, that we weren't meant to feel like it ends in a. You know, the whole film is kind of subverting that there is no fairy tale ending. And the ending of the film for Anora, it's like it's not neat. It does, perhaps it feels a bit like, you know, yeah, we're centering on her sex work, but I don't know. It felt appropriate for the film. Put it that way. It wasn't all wrapped up nice and easy, was it? It wasn't. We weren't given an easy ending for us.
But to me, that is almost an easy ending, because it's like, what does Anora do? She's a sex worker. Let's make her have sex. Like, I felt like I could have said, I don't know what the ending could have been, but yeah, I don't know. I wasn't satisfied with that. But other than that, you know, I mean, it was a beautiful final scene in lots of ways, with the snow falling, and you're right with the contrast between the earlier part.
You know, it was very, very intimate as far as what the scene was. It was very intimate, but I take your point about it. Perhaps we're just focusing that's all Anora does. Yeah.
Now, the question I had, and you told me you did have an answer to it. So the film is called Anora, but Anora introduced herself as Annie, and at points where her ID is looked at and people refer to her as Anora, she says, "No, I'm Annie. I prefer Annie." So why do you think, given that she doesn't like the name Anora, why is the film called Anora?
Ah, right, I see. So I might have totally got this wrong, right? But is that not the name she gives people when they ask her who she is when she's in the strip club? Is that not her name that she uses there?
No, it's she says it outside as well. She says, "No, I prefer Annie. Don't call me Anora. I don't like that." And then towards the end, Igor is like, "Oh, I like Anora. You know, it's a lovely name." And she clearly prefers Annie.
Yeah, I mean, because my misreading of it then, it kind of still holds with the fact that there's two versions of this person. There's the created version, the image, which is the sex worker at a club who's creating a persona, and then there's the real person behind it. So my reading of it, which turns out I took a wrong turn, because I don't think that's what she is called in the club. But the point is, there's a character called Anora who is this, like, the club character who goes around seducing men for money and getting dancers off them, that kind of stuff. And then there's the real person who's Annie. And my take on it was that we were seeing the film of the kind of the fantasy character, and then what happens when the fantasy is removed.
Right. Yeah, maybe. I actually didn't feel like the Annie that we saw in the club, I felt like was also the Annie outside. Of course, there is always a persona that one puts on in their place of work that isn't exactly the same as outside of it. But I actually felt like she really was always very true to herself. That's part of what's so nice about the film is, again, unlike in Pretty Woman, where Julia Roberts is like uncomfortable when she's dressed as a sex worker and feels out of place a lot of the time in the like wealthy environment that she finds herself in. And Anora never is like that. She like is comfortable with herself. She doesn't feel any shame or embarrassment, you know. So I feel like there isn't so as clear a split between persons, but maybe it's just simply that I like the name Anora. I think it's a good name. It's a nice title.
It's a great title, great name. You know, because it's very intriguing, isn't it?
Yeah. I just wondered about that, but there we go. We will never know. If anyone knows, tell us.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm very glad that you enjoyed the film. It's seemingly as much as I did.
Oh, yeah, loved it. Wish I'd seen it in the cinema, and I'll be looking out for it when it hopefully gets re-released, because, yeah, well worth catching on the big screen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
Thank you very much, as always. And, you know, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review or leaving us a 5-star rating somewhere, it will all help get the podcast out to a bigger audience.
So we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.